Well, hello there. Welcome to the Obi Thorn Alliance. I'm Jacob,
Public.
and in today's video, we are reviewing Top Gun Maverick. If you like different opinions, I am someone on the autism spectrum.
And I'll be offering the opinion of someone who is not. If you like our videos, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. We upload new content multiple times throughout the week. So let's get into it. We're reviewing Top Gun Maverick. We both saw this over the weekend. To summarize Top Gun Maverick, this is a sequel to the original Top Gun, which is a movie that came out in 1986. So it's been a bit of time. It starred a young Tom Cruise. This movie, we see Tom Cruise reprise his role as Maverick, but this time he no longer works at Top Gun. In the first movie, he didn't, but at the end, he decided he wanted to be a teacher. So things have passed since then. He now works in a research development team where they test stealth pilots, fighter pilots. He is then, through his usual being an idiot, making mistakes, being a bit, out of control, gets himself into a bit of trouble, but is saved by a former friend of his, Iceman, who's played by Val Kilmer in the original film. He's asked to return to Top Gun school and to be a teacher to help with basically a suicidal mission where they're not expecting the soldiers to return. So he takes on the role as their teacher and, of course, has to teach them by his rules, but then also try and fit in with what the school actually wants them to do. This movie also features some other returning characters. We get to see Miles Tanner play the son of Goose, who was Tom Cruise, or Maverick's partner in the original film, who died, unfortunately. Not in real life, but in the film. So he is now a student and returns to the school, and there's still a bit of tension there about what had happened with his father and a few other things that's happened in the last few years. And they are going on a top secret mission to take out a uranium plantation that is in an unknown location against an unknown enemy, and they have to take it out, which is seemingly impossible, but not for Maverick. Is there anything you think I missed from that summary without giving away too much?
That was a pretty good job. I just think the stakes are really high, and it's about a man trying to teach others that, it's not all fun and games, and there are stakes involved more than the first one. And I just think that the combat scenes, and it's just a well-made sequel. Like, a lot of movies, the first one is better. This proves that the sequel is actually better than the first one. And I know you can argue, well, if it wasn't for the first one, this movie wouldn't be better. But the sequel is just better in every single way possible.
Yeah, I think so. I think it is. It is more enjoyable because it builds off what was already created in the first one, and it does a nice job to link the original movie to the sequel, which isn't always done. There is some plot holes and a few characters that are missing without mention, but in tying it together with the link of being the son of Goose from the first movie is a really nice way to continue this on. Is the enemy they're fighting and the reason for their mission justifiable? Maybe not, but you need to have a reason for this movie to come about. So I think they do a really good job of linking that. The only probably nitpick is there's a few contentious things with what happens with the love interest between the first movie to the second one, and that's probably something we'll talk about a bit later. But overall, if you like the first film, I think you'd really like the second film. If you haven't seen the first one, I think you could still like this film, but maybe it won't mean as much to you because the characters are just new. There's no link to the past, which kind of helps propel this movie forward. But overall, very, very enjoyable. Do we move into giving our verdict?
Did you want to go first?
Oh, I've done enough talking. You give me your verdict first.
Out of our rating system of 100, I gave it a well-deserved 88%. I just think the acting is superb. The visual dog fighting when they're in the craft is amazing. Just so much to love about this film. The only negative that I think it really has is that it's a predictable film. It doesn't take any chances, but you could argue that it works for this film, and I just think it's a well-made sequel. It's Tom Cruise is just an actor that he does his own stunts. He just puts in a lot of work, and I think that's why he did a really good young career, and now he keeps on putting in the work, and I think it shows in this film. The character with Rooster as well, doing that redemption arc of hating Maverick, and just the characters are well developed, and I think the stakes are there compared to the first one, and I would highly recommend seeing this film. It's definitely in the top 5 best films so far. Can't say more about it.
Good review. So I've given it just a little bit lower. I went with 87%. I know I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. I enjoyed, most parts of the film. There was little, plot holes and strange things that maybe could have been slightly adjusted. The love interest was probably the main one, but we'll talk about that a bit more in the spoilers. But edge of your seat kind of stuff. The stakes were high. The action was good. They kind of removed the cheesy, lame banter that went on between the boys in the first movie, and now it's kind of modernized. The casting was really good. I'm not that big of a fan of Tom Cruise films. I haven't seen a lot of them, but he was very good in this film. There wasn't too much to dislike about it, and I think there's something there for most people. If you just want to be on the edge of your seat and entertained, that's the best thing about, for me, where it got most of its points when I was rating was the entertainment factor. It just was entertaining. It went for the right amount of time. I was enthralled the whole way through, and I think I got a satisfying ending. Yes, it had some predictability about it, but there was still some twist in it. You ultimately knew what would happen, but you still wasn't sure if it was going to, because there is that element that, sometimes movies throw curveballs at you, and the hero doesn't win and the star dies, so you never know if that's going to be thrown at you. So yeah, I gave it 87%.
Well, good scores.
Okay, let's move into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the film, maybe turn it off from here. We'll talk about some topics in it first with one of your nitpicks.
I guess let's talk about the love interest. I think that's the main one. Still got some other ones, but the other ones are kind of you to ones. I think the love interest is the big one. We did our own research, but I think if you don't do the research, it's confusing, and it assumes that it puts you in this. It doesn't explain their history together. You're just supposed to accept it with dialogue, and it's kind of like, well, are we going to get a TV show with these two? Are we going to get something? It's confusing.
Yeah, so until Jacob mentioned it, I assumed that the love interest in this film was the same love interest from the first film. I knew the actress was different, but I just thought, I didn't think much of it. I thought maybe they've recasted, but not until Jacob mentioned to me that they were different. I didn't realise, because it still works if you assumed it was the same character. You just assumed they broke up. She then fell in love with someone else, had a daughter. He left, and then Maverick has came back in and out of their life. But in fact, it's a different love interest. But we thought, well, there's no link to this, so we did a bit of research, and apparently this character Penny was mentioned in the original film, that she was a previous lover of his before, which ultimately, if you think about from the first film, when he meets Charlie from the first film in the bar, she goes, "Do you do this often?" When hitting on girls, and he goes, "Oh, this will be my second time." And she goes, "Oh, what happened to the first one?" He goes, "Oh, I don't want to talk about it. I crashed and burned." So he was referring to this character who he then ends up with in the second film, and he then also in a scene is getting disciplined, and the chief that's disciplining mentions that, oh, you've had a run in with a previous commander's daughter, and then they mention her name being Penny. But this is something that you wouldn't know unless you're a super fan or you'd done your research. But there is actually quite a clever link. I'm just disappointed that there's no mention of what happened to Charlie. Did Charlie die? Did they split up? Did they have kids together? Did she the Top Gun movie, the original, made out like they were madly in love. They went on one date, and he said he was falling for her, and she was in love with him. It was really fast. That was one of the dumb things about the first movie, but they just didn't have a happy ending, and we weren't explained why. I think maybe an explanation would have been good, even if he said, "Oh, it didn't work out with her," something like that. So that's one nitpick I have about the new love interest. But I do like the new love interest. It's just you can't end into the original film with him, being like it was a love story ultimately, and that love interest has disappeared. Like, that's not right. You need to have some kind of mention of it.
I know you have a theory of why they recast and why they didn't mention.
Well, when I asked Jacob, he said to me, "Oh, maybe she didn't want to do it," and I don't know. Maybe that's correct, but my thought was, which is a bit vague, but I thought that maybe they wanted to opt for someone that was maybe like more attractive, because Tom Cruise has kind of stayed the same or even got more attractive, you could say, from the original Top Gun, where it seems like the character, his love interest in the first film, she hasn't aged as well. So to bring her in, maybe they might see that as, it's like a mixed match, because they ultimately, movies, they want, the pretty guys, they're not the pretty girls. So that maybe there was a reason that they didn't want that, or it could be just as simple as she didn't want to do it. So I don't want to assume. That was my first theory. What other issues do you have, or positives you want to talk about the film?
Really good positive. I think they really handled the Iceman character really. That was a really touching scene. I thought they, unfortunately what happened to the actor with his whole cancer debacle is really sad, and I thought they handled it really well.
Yeah, I think that was one of the best parts of the movie that I didn't know prior. Like, I knew prior to the movie, but I didn't know leading up to the day before. Someone said, "Oh, well, I wonder if Val Kilmer's going to be speaking in this film." I was like, "I can't imagine he wouldn't be." And he goes, "Well, he had throat cancer and he can't talk anymore, but he is in the film." I was like, "Oh, okay." So we looked it up, and it said, he will be in the film, but artificial intelligence will be talking on his behalf. So in this film, they kind of handled that well by not having text message dialogue between him and Maverick, and then eventually when they met in person, he was typing stuff on a screen, and then we got him to say, he said like one sentence, so they did add a bit of speech, but it implied how difficult it was. So I would dare say this is probably going to be our last seeing of Val Kilmer in a movie, and maybe it's a touching ending that a character that he was quite famous for, maybe Batman might be his other more famous character he played, that he's kind of got a send off, and his character died in that film due to the actual same illness that he's suffering from in real life. So it's kind of a send off to him as an actor, I think. What else in the film? We talked off screen about this idea that the enemy was unnamed.
Yeah.
And my thought is, if it's not important to the storyline, maybe they don't want to create conflict. So it's just, the enemy. They always just refer it to the enemy. But a lot of clues give away that they're Russian. But, maybe they just is it important to the storyline? Because I said to Jacob, whether it was Russia, North Korea, China, would it have changed the story? And it's the same story. So maybe it's just safer just to not mention it, not to create any conflict, because behind the scenes, it probably won't create a war, but if Paramount Studios has a large amount of funding, from China, and then they make a movie where they're fighting Russia and China are friends with Russia, then does China then pull the funding from Paramount? They got to think about that sort of stuff, or does Top Gun, does no one go see it in China if they think that they're the enemies? So there is consequences for that, and I think we'll probably see that a lot more in war movies, where the enemies are unnamed to prevent, the loss of funding or the stocks in the company plummeting.
Mm.
Anything else from the film that you want to talk about?
Did you like how they handled the rooster with Maverick pulling his credentials so it would delay his joining the academy?
I liked that they went with that's why he held a grudge against him, because if it was because his father died, that would be unfair because the mother wasn't upset with Maverick and it was obvious that Maverick didn't cause the malfunction. So in the trailers, I thought that was where the tension came from. And it was like, well, if he's angry at Maverick for that, that's not his fault. Yes, his dad died, but he didn't kill him. But by adding the element of him pulling his credentials because he promised to his mother that he would do so that he wouldn't get into the flight school because she didn't want him to be a pilot like his dad.
The same thing to repeat the father to repeat the son.
Yeah, but then they mention that Meg Ryan's character died, which is, I don't know what's the point. Like, Meg Ryan is still an active actress. Like, it didn't add anything to the story, her being dead. Like, maybe she could have been there and he could have called and she could have been like, hey, like, stop being so hard on Maverick. Like, he did it. It was my fault. I told him not to. And then that's when he then decides to go save him because he's like, I forgive you. And like, oh, kind of thing. Like, I don't know if she needed to be dead. So yeah, I think they do well. It's amazing how much he looks like the character, like the son, the character he's portraying. He's a very good actor. I like him in his comedy roles, but he's starting to get a few more serious roles, and he's got a new show coming out on Paramount Plus called The Offer. So I'm intrigued to see how that goes. Some of the other casting, there were a lot of no-name actors that I hadn't seen before, or maybe not no-name, but they're just not big stars yet. There was the hangman character. I recognised him from something. I think he's been in a few different things. He's like your typical good-looking guy that gets a lot of roles. And yeah, it's a very good movie. Anything else?
Did you, because I kind of saw it coming, did you see that Maverick was going to be the one that actually was going to be the team leader? Because the Admiral said, no, you're going to be the teacher, and then, Maverick, to get the squad back for him to teach them, he's like, right, I'm going to show that I can actually do it, and then that was a cool story arc.
I saw it coming. I think it made a lot of sense, but I did think maybe he was going to sacrifice himself and die in order to save the mission, which he attempted to do, but then he was saved again. So I thought that's how the movie was going to end. Like maybe he crashed into the site or something opposed to the shot. But yeah, I think that was predictable, but a good ending. I think the fact that Rooster saved him was quite cool. And then ultimately you knew Hangman was going to come into it somehow, that he got left out of the mission. I felt that the fact that he was the only one that was sitting in a plane, like waiting to go and help, I figured he was going to come save the day. But I thought maybe he was going to be the one that took out Jet, took out the helicopter. But then that was actually Rooster. So it was cool. I liked that story. I still, even though you saw it coming, there was no guarantee. Like I really thought Tom Cruise was going to die. I thought that was going to be the way it ended. So I was still, with the predictable options that were there, I still felt surprised or on the edge of my seat.
Do you agree with me that even though normally predictability doesn't work, it kind of works for this movie?
Well, it's because you wanted it to happen, Like everyone, it's like when you watch a sports movie, you want the sporting team to win. So even though you know it's predictable and it's coming, you still hope it happens. So I don't think many people will be watching that movie go, yeah, I hope they fail this mission. So you knew they were going to complete the mission. It just wasn't certain how it was going to happen.
Do you like all the code names that they have, like Hangman, Rooster, and...
Yeah, I guess that's something that is real, that happens in flying. And then I guess they added it... I guess it was a major part of the first film because people would always be like, oh, you're my wingman, I'm Maverick, and you're Goose, and... it's just like nicknames people have given themselves based upon that movie. So they've continued that transition.
So with the future of the franchise, would you like them to make a third movie or a TV show, or reboot the franchise and maybe Tom Cruise, his son or something, takes over?
No, I think I'm fine with it ending there. I think we've closed the book. We've linked the first movie to the second. Everyone's had their kind of happy ending. No one died. You know, I really thought that someone was going to die in their squadron at least, if not Tom Cruise. So I don't think it really needs to continue on. They risk ruining it and milking it too much. Maybe a reboot in the future, like a remake of the original film, and maybe instead of it being planes, maybe it's like ships or something different, like change it a little bit. That could be okay. But in terms of a show, yes, there's storylines that aren't finished or you might want to know more information, but do they warrant a show? Maybe not. And making a show about aircraft ongoing like that, it's probably too expensive. So I think they should be happy with what they've got and leave it with a decent conclusion. And ultimately, if as Tom Cruise gets older, his only option is to become the teacher, which he was the teacher already. But as he said, he could have been, an admiral by now, but doesn't want to because his position is flying planes, and it wouldn't make sense for him to come back and not still be the one that shows them how to do everything and be the expert in the plane. So if they wait too long and he gets too old, then it wouldn't make sense. So I think, to me, seems like the story of Top Gun is that of Maverick, he will continue to do dangerous stuff to eventually he dies doing it. So unless they make another film and he dies in it, this has to be the ending because he ultimately just pushes himself to inevitable death. So,
any final thoughts?
Oh, one thing that I thought was strange. I know your thought. So at the start, he takes the ship and he's like, "Yep, we're going to push it to Mach 10 because if I don't,
the plane,
the stealth plane." He goes, "Well, then they're going to close this research facility." So the guy shows up that's going to close it down on him.
The admiral, yeah.
He takes off. And, he gets told, don't go any more than Mach 10. It's not Mach 11, 10.1. Just go to 10. So he pushes it. And you go, okay, well, that's what he does. But he's already proved his point. He's already proved, you need to keep this research open. And he's also disobeyed orders. So he already warrants getting fired. But then to push it so far that it breaks, you go, did the plane need to break? Couldn't you have just landed it and then been like, you're an idiot, like, why did you do that? Like, you're fired. But instead, not only does the plane break, he crashes, which we don't get to see, and he survives.
And he gets to drink water.
Like, he's traveling at Mach 10 with a plane that has engine failure. Like, where can he land? The only place he can land without dying is in the water. And he wasn't in the water when he came out. And you go, well, he could have ejected. He is traveling at Mach 10. So if something is traveling at that pace and he ejects, he then gets hit with the same force that he was traveling. So if you get hit with that force, instantly ripped apart. He would just get ripped apart instantly. So unless they show him land, I think that was unnecessary to be in there because he would have died, like absolutely died, and that's the end of the film. So I think it would have been or made sense if he went up there, he pushed it, and they go, okay, bring it in. And he brings it in, and he's like, what are you doing? I told you not to fly. Like, you weren't meant to take it. And he goes, you're stood down, but luckily Iceman saved you. Yeah. The film still makes complete sense because what he did, disobeying instructions, warranted him to get stood down. The fact that he crashed a plane against instructions and pushed it beyond its limits, he would have been arrested. Like, he broke so many laws there that he would have been arrested, not just stood down. So that is like a plot hole for me, or just part of the movie that didn't need to exist. Because he would have been arrested for sure. He just destroyed, maybe a $1 billion plane that had billions of dollars worth of research by just being a cowboy. Like, he would have got arrested. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, I agree with that. It felt like you wanted him to get to 10, and then he's like, I got to push it.
Like, maybe if he pushed it and, like, he had some kind of failure and then he just landed it, and you go, okay. But the fact we didn't see him crash it, like, they would have been like, mate, you just destroyed $1 billion worth of machinery. Like, you're in a lot of trouble. Not, you're fired, but Iceman said, like, no one's saving you when you. If he was flying it normally and it malfunctioned, that's fine. But he pushed it to a dangerous level. Like, he's at fault. He would have had to. He would have suffered consequences for that.
Mm.
Where just taking the plane off and not crashing it warranted him getting fired. That's fine. They go, mate, you got told. He got asked to bring it down. He's like, oh, sorry, can't. He's like, he warranted being fired. He didn't need to crash it for him to get fired.
Mm.
So yeah, that's about it. Anything you want to add?
Oh, I just think it's, besides that and the love interest, I think it's a fantastic movie. I think it's definitely worth seeing. I think it's just better to see it without seeing the sequel, to be honest. I think it's a lot better than the first one. But it's required to watch it because of, it's a contained storyline between those two.
Well, you wouldn't care about. You'd like, who's Goose and why is this guy angry at him? Like, you kind of need a bit more.
Mm.
So my final thoughts is it's a very good movie. Has some little plot holes, but they're forgiven because it was entertaining.
Mm.
So watch it and just be entertained.
Mm.
Don't. I guess every movie that's like got to do with war and ships and fighting, it's like, it's not believable. Like that's not how war goes down. So you just have to be entertained and accept that it's not correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for watching. We are the Obi Thorn Alliance. If you like different opinions, check out different videos, like and subscribe. Bye bye.